In the headlines, Korea issues a formal protest over a Japanese opinion poll on Seoul's easternmost islets of Dokdo, released in an apparent attempt to reiterate its claims. The prosecutors seek an arrest warrant for former head of the National Tax Agency on charges of accepting bribes from food and entertainment conglomerate CJ Group in exchange for favors back in 2006. Russia grants temporary asylum and allows U.S. intelligence leaker Edward Snowden to walk out of a Moscow airport transit zone despite the risk the move poses to relations with the United States. With these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Friday, August 2nd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. South Korea's foreign ministry has launched a formal complaint against Japan a day after the Japanese government released the results of its first ever public opinion survey on Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo.
The ministry called Japan's claim unjustified and warned that it will ultimately affect harmony in Northeast Asia. Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has more on the escalating tensions between Seoul and Tokyo.
Korea lashed out at Japan on Friday for conducting its first public opinion poll on the Korea-controlled Dokdo islets and urged Tokyo to drop all unjustified claims to the islets. Seoul's foreign ministry summoned Japan's political affairs minister to South Korea to lodge an official complaint against Tokyo's renewed claim to Dokdo. The ministry's actions come just a day after the Japanese government released the results of the survey, which shows that 6 in 10 Japanese people regard Dokdo, known as Takeshima in Japan, as their territory in terms of history and international law.
Our government sternly protests Japan's renewed provocative actions taken under the guise of a public survey on our territory Dokdo, which belongs to South Korea in terms of history, geography, and international law.
Dokdo has long been a thorn in Seoul-Tokyo relations, with Japan laying claim to the islets through various channels, including school textbooks and government reports. The controversial survey is the latest in a string of historically insensitive remarks made by Japan. Earlier in the week, Japanese Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso was heavily criticized for saying that Japan should learn from the tactics the Nazi regime in Germany employed to change its constitution. Just over 2 months ago, Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto said that the Japanese military's use of sexual slavery during World War II was necessary for keeping Japanese troops in order. Seoul's foreign ministry said that Japan's constant distortion of history is deplorable and warned that the recent series of provocative remarks made by Japanese politicians will become a serious obstacle not only to Seoul-Tokyo relations, but also the harmony of Northeast Asia. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
In other news, as inter-Korean talks remain at a standstill, one U.S. official made clear that Pyongyang's old tricks won't work anymore.
In a meeting with leaders of the Korean American community at the White House, a senior official to North Korea stressed that Pyongyang won't be able to play both sides to get what it wants. Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has more.
North Korea's tried and tested strategy of coming between South Korea and the U.S. to get what it wants won't work anymore. This was the message from Sidney Seiler, the Korea policy chief at the U.S. National Security Council. During a meeting at the White House with a group of Korean American community leaders Thursday, Seiler said Seoul and Washington have built close and transparent ties over the last 4 years through the Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye administrations, adding the two countries' strong alliance means Pyongyang's attempts to disrupt the relationship won't work. He also warned the reclusive state to be aware of that if it wants further negotiations with the U.S. Seiler also pointed out that inter-Korean relations will not improve without the North's efforts to denuclearize. And likewise, the official said it's hard to imagine an improvement in Washington-Pyongyang relations or progress toward peace talks, while North Korea continues to refuse to talk about the shuttered inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex. He added the U.S. is also in close talks with China and Russia over North Korea's nuclear issue. The U.S. official pointed out that following Pyongyang's series of provocative acts in recent months, the consensus is widening among members of the international community, including the six-party members, that the North's nuclear program should not be tolerated. 한단, Arirang News.
Hyundai Group Chairwoman Hyun Jung-eun will visit Mount Kumgang in North Korea this Saturday.
She will attend a memorial service marking the 10th anniversary of the death of her late husband, Chung Mong-han, the former Hyundai Group chairman. A Unification Ministry official said that Hyundai Asan filed an application for a visit of 38 company executives, which includes Hyun. The official went on to say the day-long visit will be limited to the memorial service and added the government is not planning to send any kind of political message with the delegation. The head of Hyundai Group will cross the inter-Korean border at 9:40 a.m. on Saturday, return to the south at 4 p.m. the same day. Hyundai Asan invested and operated tours to the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea, beginning in 2003 until 2008, when operations halted after a South Korean tourist was shot dead by North Korean Guard. Moving on to a high-profile bribery scandal in the country, prosecutors are seeking an arrest warrant for former tax office chief Chun Gun-pyo.
He's accused of receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash from CJ Group in return for favors. Hwang Jae reports on the case involving Korea's high-profile food and entertainment conglomerate.
The Korean government has pledged to root out tax corruption, and in a widening bribery probe into food and entertainment giant CJ Group, state prosecutors sought an arrest warrant for former tax chief Chun Gun-pyo on Friday. Chun was arrested earlier in the day, but in Korea, prosecutors must seek an arrest warrant to detain a suspect for more than 48 hours. Following 14 hours of intensive questioning, local reports say the ex-commissioner of the National Tax Service admitted to accepting money and goods from CJ, but denied it was in return for favors or abuse of his authority. Prosecutors accused Chun of receiving $300,000 and luxury watches from the conglomerate in 2006 after he was named commissioner of the tax office. During an internal audit into CJ Group in 2006, tax authorities obtained evidence the group had dodged some $300 million in corporate and income taxes. The nation's tax office, however, did not levy any penalties on the conglomerate. The investigation into the former tax chief comes at a time when the National Tax Service is going to great lengths to shake off its image as a corrupt and untrustworthy agency. But recent internal investigations of the tax office have revealed many irregularities. The office was supposed to collect around $1.5 billion more than it did between 2009 and March this year, raising suspicions of corruption within the agency. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
Korea, China, and Japan wrapped up the second round of talks on a trilateral trade pact in Shanghai on this Friday.
Korea's trade ministry said that the three countries had constructive discussions on the scope of the negotiations and ways to lower import tariffs. The ministry added that a four-day talks included working group meetings on products and services. If and when the trilateral trade pact goes into effect, it will create the world's third largest economic bloc, accounting for 1/5 of global output. The third round of negotiations will take place in Japan sometime around November.
Korea's top conglomerates are increasingly focusing their expansion on key projects overseas, and the new attempt to capture new opportunities seems to be working. Many groups have posted sizable overseas profits and sales.
But there are looming concerns that few back here at home are benefiting. For more on what impact this economic trend will have down the line, we are joined by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Associate Professor at the Catholic University of Korea, in the studio. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Well, Professor, where are conglomerates going overseas to invest, and in which sectors?
Well, in the first slide, it shows the overseas direct investment that Korea has made. And as you can see there, the total amount is growing up very rapidly. If you look at the regional components of it, most of it is going to the United States, EU, Southeast Asia, and China. Now, I just want to say that those are actually our major trading partners. So if you look at the second slide, what you see on the second slide is on one side you have the proportion of total Korean exports which are going to those regions, and the proportion of Korean overseas investment which are going to those regions. And you'll see that while they're not exactly the same, they're roughly similar. So investment is going where our exports are going. Now, if you look at this third slide, then this is the industry breakdown of where all the Korean overseas investment is going to. And you'll see that, well, most people are worried about losing manufacturing jobs, but investment in overseas investment going abroad in manufacturing is only about 1/3 of Korea's overseas investment. And actually the largest component is various services. Now, services, if Korea wants to export services, then very often you need to make investment in the country where you want to provide services. For example, if Korea wants to, say, export banking services, then you have to have a bank in that country, and that requires investment.
So why are these companies investing more abroad rather than here in the country?
Well, I think it's important to emphasize that a lot of investment is actually tied in with trade, and everybody wants more exports. Now, we think that there's three big reasons why firms may want to invest in another country. One is it's tied into trade. If Hyundai, say, wants to export cars to the United States, it needs to set up a distribution network, it needs to set up a parts network, it needs to set up aftercare services. All of that requires investment. Second reason, sometimes countries have trade barriers. So they may not allow, say, TVs to be imported into their countries. What Korean companies can do is they can set up a TV manufacturing factory in that country and export Korean parts to that country. So it's an indirect way of exporting.
So it sounds like you're saying that by investing abroad, you're essentially extending the assembly line of our current exports and our goods. But what could be some of the side effects of all this overseas investment?
So we are sending lower wage jobs into other countries to try to maintain higher wage jobs in Korea. Now, in the long term, that's probably a good decision, but in the short term, that can cause social problems like income disparity because we're sending jobs, unskilled jobs to other countries, so that may make income disparity bigger in the short run.
So is it fair to expect the overseas profits to trickle down to the local economy? And if so, what can be done to facilitate this?
Well, I think that's, in the end, better for Korean companies. As I mentioned, a lot of these investments are tied to exports of goods and services. So even if we get parts from other countries, when we export, say, Samsung smartphones, most of the value added in the Samsung phone is actually made in Korea. So we're trying to keep a larger proportion of that higher value added in the country while still maintaining our competitiveness. Second, people will be, when companies do well, their stock prices go up. So that will help the domestic stock owners. In the long run, we're going to have to compete for the higher value-added jobs as well. So we need a better education system, we need a better R&D infrastructure, and that's what really we need to focus on for the next decade.
All right, sounds like we need some creative solutions and not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thanks so much for your comments tonight.
Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances that
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
the United States, the latest report, less than a
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on maneuver trying to cover up the South's true intentions Now, Russia has offered at least a temporary home to Edward Snowden, the former CIA worker wanted by the U.S. for leaking its secret surveillance programs. That means a ticket out of the transit area of a Moscow airport, where he's been living for weeks now. Washington is less than impressed with Russia's decision. Kim Young-gil reports.
He is one of the most wanted men in the world, but for the next 12 months at least, Edward Snowden has legal permission to live and possibly even work in Russia. With a permit, he is safely out of the reach of American prosecutors and ends more than a month of legal limbo at Moscow's main airport. Unsurprisingly, Moscow's decision has infuriated Washington.
We are extremely disappointed that the Russian government would take this step despite our very clear and lawful requests in public and in private to have Mr. Snowden expelled to the United States to face the charges against him.
A spokesperson for the Kremlin said Thursday that the decision was not made by President Vladimir Putin, but by Russian immigration officials. Snowden's father thanked Russia for granting his son temporary asylum.
I am again thankful to the Russian people, President Vladimir Putin and Anatoly Kucherena for the courage, the strength, the humanity that they have demonstrated in what I believe is this noble action of protecting my son and keeping him safe.
Snowden's father said he plans to visit his son in Russian capital soon. Edward Snowden was not caught on camera leaving the airport Thursday, but his lawyer said he left by himself in a regular taxi. Extremely disappointed by the news, Washington says it will reconsider an upcoming summit between U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin in September. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, the verdict is out on Cleveland kidnapper and sexual abuser Ariel Castro, who had imprisoned and abused 3 women in his home for 10 years. He has been sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 1,000 years. Our Kanya Lee has the details.
Ariel Castro, wearing an orange jumpsuit with his hands and feet cuffed, entered the courtroom for his sentencing. The 53-year-old Ohio man, who abducted, imprisoned, and raped 3 young women for more than a decade in his home, was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 1,000 years.
Don't deserve to be out in our community. You're too dangerous, because in your mind, you're a victim, again, as opposed to those who actually did suffer the victimization.
In his final statement to the court, Castro said he was sorry for his actions, but showed no remorse.
What I'm trying to get is that these people are trying to paint me as a monster, and I'm not a monster. I'm sick.
Earlier in the hearing, prosecutors presented graphic details of the crimes, including a replica of the house where Castro imprisoned the women in the basement. It was last week when Castro pled guilty to hundreds of criminal charges, including murder, for beating and starving one of his victims when she was pregnant, causing her to miscarry 5 times. On the day of his sentencing, the victim, 32-year-old Michelle Knight, read a statement saying that Castro made her life miserable since the day he abducted her in 2002.
You took 11 years of my life away, and I have got it back. I spent 11 years in hell.
The former school bus driver is also guilty of kidnapping 2 other young women, Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus, in Cleveland between 2002 and 2004. He also fathered a child, now 6 years old, with Berry. After years of searching for the women, who were all in their 20s when they went missing, they were finally found on May 6th after Berry escaped and found neighbors who then called the police. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
In a month's time, Turkey's largest city will play host to a plethora of Korean cultural events, from musical performances to film festivals. Our Na Hyun-kyung gives us a sneak preview of the 2013 Istanbul Gyeongju World Culture Expo.
Istanbul's landmark Hagia Sophia stands proudly over the city square. And it's here in the economic and historical heart of Turkey where the Istanbul Gyeongju World Cultural Expo will soon be held under the theme of Road, Encounter, and Companion. The National Orchestra of Korea will be featuring performances of traditional Korean instruments, while the Cheongdong Theater Foundation is scheduled to perform classic musicals.
We plan to show aspects of the Shilla dynasty and our radiant culture. It'll also be a chance to boast Korea's IT technology. We'll demonstrate both traditional and modern culture.
A Silk Road expedition is currently making its way from China to the opening ceremony in Istanbul along the historic trade routes that once linked Europe to the Far East. The expedition aims to attract international attention for the expo and act as a cultural exchange. A 1.2-kilometer-long Kilnori parade is expected to attract some 1 million people to Taksim Square on September 1st. Meanwhile, K-pop concerts, Korean film festivals, taekwondo demonstrations, and many other events will celebrate the popularity of the Korean wave.
In order to convey the very essence of DNA of Korea, we plan to focus on showcasing our unique culture. In addition, since this expo cannot be purely event-driven, the Institute of Korean Studies will be hosting special seminars on our traditional and social culture.
The expo will run for 23 days starting at the end of August, providing the stage for Korea and Turkey to strengthen their deep cultural and historical roots. 나현경, Arirang News.
We'll have to wait a couple of days to find out whether golfer Park In-bi will make history in Scotland.
But we won't have to wait as long to find out if one Korean UFC fighter will. SJ standing by with a preview of a big UFC fight taking place in Rio.
Guys, mixed martial arts is the fastest growing sport in the world right now, and one Korean fighter has his sights set on the UFC Featherweight Championship belt. His name, the Korean Zombie, Chung Chang-sung. Now, the main event in Rio de Janeiro will be highlighted by the Korean Zombie taking on the current UFC featherweight champion, Jose Aldo. The South Korean fighter hopes to make history and become UFC's first Korean champ. While Aldo is the heavy favorite going into this fight, Chung is known for his surprise maneuvers. Now, the home crowd will be supporting the champion, but it's anyone's fight. And now moving on to the KBO, the 10th KBO team has found themselves a new manager, and he's no stranger to winning. Manager Cho Bum-hyun, who led the 2009 Kia Tigers team to a championship and gold medal finish at the Guangzhou Asian Games, will now lead the KT Wiz. Now, Cho's deal is for 3 years and 1.5 billion won, or roughly 1.3 million US dollars. Now, the Wiz will join the Korea Baseball Organization in 2015. And staying in the KBO, let's take a look at some Friday night action, starting off with the first place Samsung Lions taking on the second place LG Twins. Now, both starting pitchers in this game, Chao Chan for the Samsung Lions and Woo Gyu-min for LG, were absolutely lights out, throwing blanks across the board until the 6th inning of the game. Lee Jin-young, RBI single to left field, scores Park Yong-taek, 1-0 LG Twins. 2 batters later, my captain, Lee Byung-gyu, 2-run shot to right field. LG takes a 3-0 lead. 8th inning, Samsung gets a pair of runs to keep it close, but the LG Twins hangs on to take this game 4-2, your final score. And take a look at other scores from around the league. The NC Dinos on a streak right now. They beat the Hana Eagles 4-0 and currently in the top of the 11th inning, Tucson Bears and the SK Wyverns tied 4-4. And currently in the 8th inning, the Nexen Heroes are up 6-4 over the Kia Tigers. And now with that said, that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. See you guys again after midnight for your sports needs.
Time to go over to Kwon Soa for the latest weather forecast. Hi, Soa. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, guys. I hope the gloomy weather didn't spoil your mood today.
Well, not really, but I hope that anyone who had vacation plans over the weekend won't be affected by the rain.
Right. I bet those people who planned their vacations in advance for early August never would have thought the monsoon season would last so long. Well, at least it's not going to rain all the time and everywhere this weekend. Now, the central regions will be the ones affected by the monsoon front tomorrow, which is on its way toward North Korea. Now, the good thing is that the rain should mainly be concentrated in the early morning and again in the evening. So in between during the day, you can expect a standstill. In Chungcheong province, meanwhile, there are chances of some pop-up showers when the atmosphere gets unstable. Temperatures, however, stay stable in the 30s in much of the nation. Seoul should hit 30 degrees, Daegu and Gwangju 33, and Busan 31. And scorching hot in Daejeon and Jeju Island too. Dokdo and Myeongkang won't be moving from the cooler 20s. Now, for those on vacation, a quick preview. Sunday and Monday will have nationwide sporadic rain. Tuesday, it'll just affect the central regions, and then the monsoon should be gone. Now, I'll be gone in a few seconds, but you'll see me again after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon. Have a great weekend.